Undercover boss orders breakfast, freezes when the waitress whispers she's starving. Dawn had just broken over the streets, and soft golden sunlight filtered through the dusty glass of Sunrise Diner, the very first branch, once the greatest pride of Michael Carter's career. At 50 years old, Michael was no longer the man bustling behind the kitchen counter or carrying steaming cups of coffee as he did in his startup years. Now, he was the owner of a prestigious restaurant chain, a man whose name had become synonymous with success and the inspirational story of rising from nothing. Back then, he had firmly believed, a lasting empire cannot be built on dry profits alone. It must be nurtured by customer satisfaction and the happiness of the people who work here. But as the years passed and his business expanded, Michael was forced to hand over operations to a team of senior executives. Board meetings became dominated by immaculate financial reports and smooth growth figures, as if everything was running perfectly. Yet recently, troubling whispers had begun to reach his ears. Loyal customers complained that the quality of the food was no longer the same. Former employees confided that the warm atmosphere once called their second home had faded, leaving only exhaustion and coldness behind. The reports still showed stability, but Michael Carter, the man who could once feel every heartbeat of his beloved creation, knew there were things that numbers simply couldn't measure. And so, that morning, he put on his old worn coat, pulled his hat low, and used the alias he once went by when he was just a young server. Quietly, he stepped through the doors of Sunrise Diner as an ordinary customer. No one recognized him, but that was exactly what Michael wanted. He needed to see with his own eyes, hear with his own ears, and above all, feel with his own heart whether Sunrise still held the warmth it once did. The dawn of a new day had risen. But could the dawn of Sunrise Diner ever return? The atmosphere inside the diner felt heavier than usual. The faint clink of spoons against cups and the low hum of the coffee machine in the corner seemed to dissolve into a muted silence. No one bothered to offer cheerful greetings as they had in years past. Michael chose his usual seat by the window, the very spot where he once proudly watched streams of customers come and go, each cup of steaming coffee delivered with bright smiles. But today, that scene seemed nothing more than a memory. He ordered a simple breakfasta, soft pancake, and a rich cup of coffee, the very staples that had once made Sunrise Diner famous. The young waitress approached, carrying a worn-out tray in her thin, trembling hands, as she gently placed the plate of food on the table. She tried to smile, but that smile couldn't hide the deep sadness in her eyes or the dark circles beneath the eyes that hadn't seen makeup in days. Michael bowed his head slightly in thanks, his eyes following her quiet, retreating figure. And then, as she poured coffee for the customer at the next table, thinking no one could hear, her voice drifted out in a faint whisper, softer than the sound of coffee trickling into the cup. "I'm so hungry, haven't eaten anything all morning, and I don't even know if I can afford lunch after this shift." Michael froze. The cup of coffee he just lifted suddenly felt unbearably heavy. The steam rising from the thin porcelain cup seemed to turn into a chilling draft that cut through him to the bone. He looked down at the plate of pancakes before him, the very dish he had once poured his heart and soul into perfecting, crafting the gentlest flavor to start every morning right. And yet now, that plate sat cold and hard. The buttery aroma he once took pride in was nothing more than a distant memory. Michael's shoulders sank. The dish that had once made him proud had now become a bitter reminder of the values he had once sworn to uphold at all costs. A single, haunting question echoed through his mind. "I've built an entire empire, but in the end, am I letting someone starve, right here, in my own house?" In the days that followed, Michael didn't return to his office. No more closed-door meetings, no more smooth financial presentations filled with stable figures. Instead, he chose to return to Sunrise Diner not just once, but many times, during the hours no report had ever mentioned. Early morning. Before the cafe was even fully lit, before the aroma of fresh coffee could fill the air, Michael was already there. From a hidden corner, he watched tired feet shuffle into their shifts, polite greetings now reduced to half-hearted nods. The air felt heavy, as if every forgotten dream hung suspended there after another long, restless night. Midday. When the diner was packed with customers, Michael sat quietly at his familiar table by the dusty window. He observed in silence. Plates of cold eggs were hurriedly served. Dry, crumbling bread left scattered crumbs across plates like silent evidence of how temporary everything had become. And the coffee, the pride of his brand, was now thin, weak, and colorless, just like the fading spirit of those standing behind the counter. At the cashier counter, Garethi branch manager spoke in his usual flat, calculating tone. Cut the breakfast portions in half. Water down the coffee if needed, don't waste anything. And the customer tips? Put them into the internal fund. Anyone who's got a problem with that can quit. Those cold words stabbed straight into Michael's heart, hurting far more than any financial loss ever could. Late afternoon. As the weak rays of the setting sun stretched across the dusty windows, Michael saw something he knew he would never forget for the rest of his life. The young waitress, small in stature, her apron worn thin, sat curled up in a hidden corner near the storage room. In her hands was a piece of dry, hard bread, and she took hurried bites just to quiet the hunger gnawing at her after a grueling shift. Beside her, a crumpled overdue rent notice lay folded, its edges creased and worn, the bold red numbers glaring like a cruel reminder. Her weary eyes stared blankly at the cracked screen of her old phone, where a cold, flashing message appeared. Power cut warning, effective tomorrow. And then, as if she were far too familiar with burying her sorrows, she stood up, adjusted her faded apron, and walked out of the shadows. Though her eyes were still red, she forced a thin smile for the passing customers before quietly leaving the diner. Michael clenched his fists, his eyes burning. Suddenly, all those financial reports became nothing but meaningless, hollow numbers. And all those promises he once made of a warm, fair, and humane workplace now stared back at him like a broken reflection in a cracked mirror. In that moment, Michael realized something he had forgotten over the long, exhausting years. Sunrise Diner didn't lose its soul because of a lack of customers. It lost it because the people who stayed no longer had the faith to offer a genuine smile. And right then, beneath that gloomy twilight sky, Michael made a silent vow. I've let this place fall into darkness for far too long, but from this very moment, I will be the one to bring back the light it deserves. He sat in his luxury apartment, lost in thought, staring out the window as the city lights glittered below him like lost stars. Quietly, his hands turned the pages of an old notebook, the very notebook he once used during his startup days. The yellowed paper still bore his neat handwriting. Sunrise Diner isn't just a place to sell breakfast. It must be a place where people find the warmth of home, even if it's just through a simple cup of coffee and a slice of bread. Michael's eyes lingered on that line for a long, long time, his vision blurring. He vividly remembered the days he stood behind the counter, personally brewing coffee for his guests, remembering every firm handshake with his very first partner's back, when every employee's smile shone brighter than the sunlight streaming through the windows. Early the next morning, he returned to Sunrise Dinner, this time, no longer in hiding. As the glass doors swung open, the morning sunlight poured in, sweeping away the gloom that had hung there for so long. Michael didn't have to say a word. His presence alone was enough a signal that the storm had passed, and a new dawn was beginning to rise. He walked straight into the kitchen and stood face to face with Gary, the now suspended branch manager. Michael's eyes swept silently over the familiar staff members, not with blame, but with a quiet, piercing question. How long has it been since you stopped believing in this place? He reached out and opened the old refrigerator where the ingredients were stored. Torn packaging, moldy, supplies everything inside, stood as a silent testament to the long-buried neglect. And at that very moment, he announced the launch of the Sunrise Reborn Reform Program. Starting today, those who have silently endured, those who have held on to even the smallest hope, will be the ones to help me rewrite the story of this place. He turned toward the young waitress, her face still marked with surprise and disbelief. Michael spoke gently, but his words held the firm weight of an unshakable decision. You will be the first selected for the senior management training program. And when you return, I hope it will be you who brings warmth back to Sunrise Diner, just like we once dreamed on the very first day. Sunlight pierced through the old glass windows, casting a golden glow across the space, marking the first true dawn of a new beginning. Laughter slowly returned. Handshakes grew firmer. And for the first time in so long, steaming cups of coffee were carried out, filling the air once again with the rich aroma of days past. Michael stood by the second-floor window, his gaze following the bustling scene below where the sizzle of frying pans rang out and the scent of warm pancakes spread throughout the diner. He gently closed his eyes, a faint smile forming on his weathered face. This is the dawn I once dreamed of. And this time, he knew that light would never fade again. The atmosphere inside the diner felt as if a storm were about to break. The staff stood in quiet rows, their eyes flickering anxiously at one another. Everyone had heard the rumors about an emergency meeting, but no one had expected that the person stepping through the doors at precisely 9 a.m. that day would be the founder himself, Michael Carter. Today, he wasn't wearing the old coat of his secret visits. On his sharp gray suit, his name badge gleamed proudly. Michael Carter, CEO, founder, Sunrise Restaurant Group. The entire hall fell into stunned silence. Gary stood frozen behind the counter, his hands trembling, his face pale as ash. The young waitress, the one at the center of Michael's sleepless night, stood there too, her hands clutching the hem of her worn apron, her eyes shimmering with a fragile flicker of hope. Michael stepped straight to the front. His voice echoed through the hall deep, warm but unwavering, each word striking directly at the hearts of everyone present. Sunrise Diner was built from the days when I had nothing but my own two hands, from a dream of creating a place filled with warmth and hope. But today, standing here, I realize I have let that flame fade away for far too long. He gestured to the technical team. The large LED screen at the front of the hall lit up. Gary was shown calmly accepting thick envelopes from a supplier, wearing a cold, indifferent smile. Footage of low-quality ingredients being pushed into storage played across the screen. And then, a chilling audio recording echoed throughout the hall. Water down the coffee, save the cheese, collect all the tips into the internal fund. Anyone who doesn't like it is free to quit. The entire hall held its breath. Michael turned sharply, his eyes like blades, cutting straight through to Gary. Gary, do you have anything to say before I sign your termination order right here, right now? Gary swallowed hard, stumbling over half-formed words, but in the end, he stood silent in shame. Without hesitation, Michael pulled out his fountain pen and signed the termination order with a firm, decisive stroke. Asterisk cost-cutting will never mean trampling on human dignity. From this moment, you are officially dismissed. And for those who have aided in this corruption, you have a choice. Walk out of that door, or stay and help me rebuild from the ground up with respect, kindness, and integrity. Asterisk. Michael descended into the crowd and walked directly toward the small, quiet waitress. His voice softened, carrying the warmth of a gentle morning breeze. Why didn't you leave this place sooner? The girl gave a faint smile, a sad smile, but her eyes glowed with a resilient, unshakable light. Because I still hoped that one day this place would be warm again, like the family breakfast everyone once dreamed of. Michael gently took her hand and pulled a bank card from his pocket. Asterisk. There's $50,000 on this card. It's not a gift. It's a sincere apology. And more than that, it's an investment in the courage and kindness you held on to, even through the hardest days. Asterisk. Michael turned around, his voice rich with emotion. And starting today, I officially invite you to join the Senior Management Training Program. I want to see you not long from now standing right here, inspiring new generations and bringing the dawn back to Sunrise Diner. Applause erupted like a vibrant symphony. But this time, it wasn't just a celebration, it was the sound of a new era beginning. An era where kindness and fairness would once again shine brightly, where everyone had the right to hope and to find happiness. That historic moment wasn't marked simply by the stroke of a black fountain pen, but by bright, hopeful eyes and hands clasped together in solidarity. Michael didn't forget to turn and look at the young waitress one last time. She now stood tall beside the new sign that read, Sunrise Reborn. Her eyes no longer held the look of someone lost, but shone with quiet pride. Pinned to her chest was a gleaming name tag, Assistant General Manager, Lily Anderson. Michael gave a slight nod and quietly stepped back from the stage, leaving the spotlight to the young people now ready to lead the way into a new journey. He stood in silence, hands tucked into his pockets, his gaze lost in the lively scene below. Laughter and cheerful conversations echoed like a joyful melody. The sweet scent of caramel popcorn mingled with the rich aroma of thick coffee, carried on the cool morning breeze that filled the entire space. Michael's eyes fell upon the corner table once, the very place where that same young girl used to sit quietly, hurriedly eating a piece of dry bread during her darkest days. Now, that corner shone bright with radiant smiles, steaming cups of coffee, and complete breakfasts, just as he had once dreamed. He gently closed his eyes, his shoulders relaxing, as a soft smile played across his resolute face. When he opened them again, the morning sunlight streamed through the window, painting warm golden stripes across the cool, polished floor. Michael whispered softly to himself, to his once-abandoned dreams. This is the dawn I always dreamed of. A new day at Sunrise Diner began not only with golden sunlight filtering through crystal-clear windows, but also with bright smiles at the kitchen counter, cheerful morning greetings ringing across the dining hall, and the irresistible scent of pancakes blending with the comforting warmth of rich coffee. At the small stage set in the center of the Halance, a forgotten and gloomy corner now stood a brilliant new sign, Sunrise Reborn, respect, kindness, integrity. The small, humble waitress of the past now stood proudly in her crisp new uniform, a gleaming name badge pinned to her chest. Lily Anderson, Assistant General Manager. Lily stood tall, her eyes shining with the light of pride. She slowly began to share her story, her voice warm, yet full of strength and conviction. Asterisk. There were days when I thought I wouldn't have the courage to keep standing here, but it was the faint light of hope that guided my way. And today, I stand here not just to speak of a tearful past, but to affirm one thing. True dawn always waits for those who never give up. Icings. Michael Carter stood quietly, his arms crossed over his chest, his contemplative eyes taking in every precious moment unfolding before him. Customers poured in and out, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Plates of hot, golden pancakes were served with genuine care and warmth. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet scent of pastries, reviving every cherished memory from those early startup days. Michael closed his eyes and drew in a deep, full breath, overwhelmed by a serene peace he had lost for so long. When he opened his eyes, the morning sunlight bathed the windows in gold, and a satisfied, peaceful smile appeared on his weathered face. This is the dawn I once dreamed of," he whispered softly, as if making a quiet promise to himself. Asterisk. You can build a magnificent empire, but if you forget the value of humanity, it will all be nothing more than a castle built on sand. A sustainable business is not constructed from cold, lifeless numbers, but from hearts that have been warmed, dreams that have been rekindled, and lives that have rediscovered happiness because of you. For in the end, the greatest legacy you can leave behind is not vast wealth, but the countless lives touched by your kindness and compassion. Asterisk.